Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. As you can see, my Chinese Village Penjing, I haven't touched it since I brought it from the plant room out here into the greenhouse. And it's growing with lots of vigor now, so today I'm going to prune up the trees and clean up the landscape. I'm going to begin by weeding the landscape. I gave it a really thorough watering, so hopefully the weeds will pull out a little easier and I can get them by the roots so they don't come back. I don't think I got that one by the root. Yeah, there's a lot of cleanup work to do in here. And I'm getting these weeds out before they seed. You can see there's seed pods on them, and once they mature they go brittle and then they just pop open and you get hundreds of new seeds spreading out across the landscape. They pop like popcorn and I gotta get rid of them. The reason this planting has so many weeds is that my plant room in the winter is so crowded I don't have space to move trees around to get to the ones that are, either at the window or the back of the room. So even if I see weeds developing, I can't reach them to get the weeds pulled out. So my solution, I've got to get less plants up in the heated plant room. So I'm going to try and overwinter more of them in the basement next year, in the cool basement. There's a lot of ficus this year that I kept warm over the winter, and they didn't really do any better than the ones in the basement. They just, even though they were kept warm and under grow lights, they still pretty well stayed dormant. They didn't grow much in the winter at all. So I'm just going to keep them cool. It's much easier, less watering, less insect problems. And I don't seem to get any difference in growth anyway. If they're kept cool in the winter, I find in spring they put on a huge growth spurt, that they're very, very vigorous. And if I keep them warm in the winter, they grow a little more moderately. So they don't push that huge growth spurt in spring. So maybe, as they get more refined, that's a better thing, not to have that big vigorous spring growth spurt. So maybe the more refined trees I'll keep warm in the winter, and the ones I'm growing can stay in the basement. Well, the areas that I've weeded are definitely looking a little more civilized. So we had that really cold night. Not last night, but the night before, 6 degrees Celsius, or I think that's 42 degrees Fahrenheit. So really, really cool. And today, we have a high of 28 degrees Celsius, and lows of about, 11 or 12 at night. I think tonight is actually 17, which is really warm for nighttime this time of year. So you can see, it's tough growing tropical trees in Canada here. The growing season's so short. The progress I make in a year is like equivalent to 3 months in the tropics, because that's about all the good growth I get is 3 months of the summer, where I get nice warm temperatures, and the rest of the time they kind of grow very slowly, but they're basically dormant. And it's not so much the temperature, it's a combination of temperature and light. Like even the grow lights aren't bright. They're not bright like the sun. They help, but there's no substitute for sunshine. But I enjoy the challenge of trying to grow tropical trees up here in a cold climate.
And it can be done. It just takes, well, 4 times as long to develop a tree as it does in the tropics. Yeah, it's looking much, much better. I have a long way to go. So I'll keep weeding the penjing here, and we'll come back and have a look at it when that's all done. I have finished the weeding. There was a lot of weeds in here. You can see them out front here. It's just thick as weeds. Yeah, so that's all weeded now. It looks a lot better. There's still a lot of work to go. So next, I think I'm going to prune up the trees. The trees in this planting don't have to look 100% natural because they're city trees, and you know, it's quite typical that these trees would be pruned to keep them small because they're near the houses. So I can make them look sort of in between topiary and natural trees. So kind of keeping them compact and maybe a little artificial looking, and I think that would suit the planting quite nicely. If I make them look like totally natural trees, I think it would, instead of complementing the planting, I think it would detract from it. I think I want these trees to look like, you know, they're garden trees that are pruned and manicured by the owners of the houses. I don't want them looking, you know, wild. I definitely want, you know, the trees up front to be the tallest. And as I go back in the planting, they should get shorter to make them look like they're in the distance. So I think I'll just start pruning, and I could use the blue scissors and just profile prune them, which would do quite a good job. And I think I will. I think it's the best way of just coming in and kind of rounding the trees out. That'll do for a starting point anyway. So this tree, you know, it's not that tall. The leader did die off on it. These other trees are quite tall. I think they need to be pruned back quite hard. And I waited to do this until the trees had built up some vigor in them. So they've been outside for a while. And they've, you know, they're growing well. There's vigor in them. And the trees back here have to get shorter. And shortest at the back here. And the ones at the very back should be quite short. Something like that. And then these ones will get pruned back also. And this one. This should stimulate a lot of back budding on the trees. And I should get some good compact growth. Hopefully, anyway. Now, how is that looking? Well, it's a bit of a mess, that's what it is, but let me have a look at the trees. So it's not too bad. This tree would look probably better a little taller, or the other one's a little smaller. I think I am going to I've got a good leader on this tree here. I can hard prune it back. I think it's getting too tall. So, here I go. Right here. Taking the top off, I'll reduce this back. It's looking better. This one's a little tall. It's not too bad, but I'm thinking I could take it down just a little further. So here I go. Bit of a hard prune on that one. This one could come back a bit further too. And the one behind it also. If I don't hard prune them like this, they'll just keep getting, a little larger every year. And then, you will have to do the hard pruning eventually because trees just keep growing. So I think now is a good time to do that hard pruning. Get them pruned back. Now, how is that looking? Well, that's certainly more compact. I think that's going to do it. I think that looks good. So I'll clean up the leaves on the landscape and then we'll have a look at it. I have got the planting all cleaned up now. So it's looking much more miniature without all those weeds, with the trees pruned back to a little better size and shape. So I could leave it there, or I could keep going. I think my next step, I'm going to spray the trees with soap and water. I didn't see any insects on them, but just as a preventative, I'll spray them with soap and water, give the planting a thorough watering, and that might be it. If it was getting closer to show time, I would clean up the landscape and everything and, perfect it all. But right now, I'm just going to concentrate on getting the trees growing and looking good. And if I decide to show it this fall, which I'm sure I will, there's a lot of fall shows coming up. There's the KW show, the Toronto show. I think there's going to be another London show. There's probably a Bonsai of the Royal Botanical Gardens show. There's going to be a lot of fall shows, so I don't like to put the same trees in each show, so maybe some variety. Yeah, so my next step is soap and water. I'm going to spray the trees now with the soap and water, so here I go. And then I'll spray from above. This is just a preventative spray in case there's any insects on the trees. This will kill them. And when scale insects are young, you can't see them. They're microscopic. So that's why it's a good idea to spray your trees regularly, because you'll stop all those crawling insects before they turn into mature adults with those hard shells around them. Okay, so I'll let that sit for a bit, and then I'll give the planting a thorough rinse. I've left the soap and water on for a few minutes, and now I'll rinse it off. And I'll be giving the planting a thorough watering. Rotate it around. I'll wash the houses off too at the same time. Okay. That is good. My Chinese Village Penjing is pruned up, weeded, sprayed for insects, so it's ready to grow once again. So hopefully these trees will fill out nicely, start looking good in the future. I'm hoping I get lots of back budding so I get this kind of dense canopy on them. Yeah, so that's it. The trees in this penjing are Tiger Bark Ficus, and they were started from cuttings. There's a whole bunch of cuttings that were given to various Toronto Bonsai Society members, and each person was to come up with some plan of what to do with these Tiger Bark Ficus cuttings. So I created this Chinese village. Other people grouped them together and made a fusion type ficus. There were a lot of different things that people did with these ficus cuttings. So yeah, it's coming along. It's the trees are getting a little more mature every year, and I think the entire penjing is slowly evolving. Each year I look at the design of it and I make a few changes here and there, and yeah, I think it'll be an ongoing process where I'll continue working on the gardens and making it all look more and more interesting and more realistic. So that is all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.